Nobody will hear you cry when I tell you how worthless you are, Dominic whispered, leaning across the conference table in the empty office. His voice carried that special kind of quiet that somehow feels louder than shouting. The digital clock on the wall read 7:03 a.m. Outside, the morning sun hadn't fully risen, casting long shadows through the blinds. I sat perfectly still, my resume folder clutched in my hands like a shield. This performance review had been scheduled at this ungodly hour for one reason only. I've been waiting months for this, he continued, tapping a thick folder labeled with my name. Every mistake, every failure, all documented. His smile widened as he reached for the folder. Then the main doors swung open. The sound of multiple footsteps echoed through the empty workspace. Dominic's head snapped up, his expression shifting from smugness to confusion. Alara, the HR director, strode in with purpose, flanked by 2 security team members. Without acknowledging Dominic, she walked directly to me and placed a sealed envelope in front of me. "Open it, Linnea," she said gently. When I did, Dominic's face transformed in a way I'll never forget, from confidence to terror in the span of a single heartbeat. Before I share what happened next, you need to understand everything that led to this moment. The 6 months of psychological warfare that pushed me to the edge, the evidence I collected, and most importantly, why what happened next changed not just my life, but the entire company forever. My name is Linnea Ashford. I've always been the person who does things by the book, the reliable one, the problem solver. Before all this, I led our company's most successful product launch in 5 years. That success earned me a transfer to our flagship department, where I first met Dominic. From the beginning, something felt off. Dominic welcomed me with a stiff handshake and words that seemed supportive on the surface, but delivered with a chill that made me question if I'd imagined it. "Great to have you join us. Your reputation precedes you," he'd said, eyes evaluating me like I was an unexpected obstacle. The first few weeks seemed normal. I learned the department's systems, met my teammates, Veda, Archer, and Pax, all of whom seemed oddly reserved around Dominic. They were friendly enough when he wasn't around, but the atmosphere shifted whenever he entered a room. Conversations died. People found sudden interest in their computer screens. It started small. Dominic questioned minor decisions in my reports, things too insignificant to push back on. "Are you sure about this projection?" Or, "Did you double-check these numbers?" Always in front of others, always with that hint of doubt in his voice. By week 3, he began excluding me from crucial emails. I discovered this when Veda mentioned a meeting I should attend. "Didn't you get the thread about the quarterly planning session?" she asked, surprised when I had no idea what she meant. "Must have been an oversight," Dominic said when I approached him privately. "I'll make sure you're included next time." His eyes, however, told a different story. They watched me with cold calculation, assessing how I would respond. I did what I thought was right. I worked harder, arrived earlier, stayed later, triple-checked every report. But something changed in month 2. During a team presentation where I outlined a new efficiency protocol that could save the company significant resources, Dominic interrupted. "That's actually based on Archer's framework from last year," he announced to the room. 20 pairs of eyes shifted to me, witnessing my confusion. Archer looked equally puzzled but remained silent. "I developed this independently," I said, maintaining my composure. "But I'd love to see Archer's work for comparison." "Let's move on," Dominic replied, dismissing the topic entirely. After the meeting, I searched company archives for Archer's supposed framework. It didn't exist. Later that week, I overheard Dominic speaking to our division VP. "Linnea has potential, but needs close supervision. Her attention to detail isn't what her previous managers claimed." The VP nodded, glancing at me through the glass conference room wall. The damage was done. The pattern escalated. My access to certain data systems was restricted due to security protocol updates. Projects I initiated were reassigned. My suggestions in meetings were acknowledged, then immediately reframed as someone else's idea, usually Dominic's. When our department prepared the quarterly manufacturing quality assessment, I noticed concerning patterns in our newest production line. The failure rate showed statistical anomalies that indicated potential consumer safety issues. I documented my findings and brought them directly to Dominic. "I'll review these," he said, taking my analysis. 2 days later, I received the final report for team distribution. My sections had been dramatically altered. The warning indicators were gone, replaced with sanitized language that masked the problems. When I questioned this privately, Dominic's response chilled me. "You're overreacting to normal variations," he said. "This isn't your previous department. We have different standards here." When I persisted, his tone hardened. "The report is finalized. Send it as is." I did something then that would later save me. I kept both versions. I saved everything. Original reports, emails, meeting recordings when permitted. I didn't know why yet, but something deep inside told me to create a paper trail. The situation deteriorated further. Dominic began calling me into his office for coaching sessions that consisted solely of criticism. My performance, my communication style, even my professional appearance became targets. "Your presentation style makes people uncomfortable," he claimed, though feedback from colleagues suggested otherwise. The isolation tactics intensified. Team lunches happened without notice. Crucial decisions were made in impromptu hallway discussions I wasn't part of. When important clients visited, I was assigned urgent tasks that kept me away. Veda noticed. "He did this to Talia before you," she whispered one day at the coffee machine. "She left after 4 months. Couldn't take it anymore." "Why?" I asked. Veda glanced around before answering. "Dominic only thrives when he's the smartest person in the room. Anyone who might outshine him becomes a target." I researched Thalia that evening. She'd been highly accomplished before joining our department. Now she worked for a smaller company in a reduced role. I found others too, all high performers who had brief tenures under Dominic before departing or transferring. The pattern was undeniable. By month 4, my health began suffering. Sleep became elusive. Anxiety followed me home each night. My appetite diminished. Friends commented on my weight loss, the shadows under my eyes. I considered resigning, but couldn't. My mother's progressive illness required expensive treatments not fully covered by insurance. My savings were depleting. I needed this job and its health benefits. So I adapted. I documented every interaction with Dominic. I forwarded important emails to my personal account. I recorded meetings when company policy allowed. I built relationships with colleagues in other departments. Most importantly, I kept watching the production quality issue that Dominic had dismissed. The turning point came last week. A system alert indicated anomalies in 3 consecutive production batches, exactly the pattern I'd warned about. I pulled the data directly, bypassing the filtered reports, and discovered the situation had worsened. This wasn't just about quality anymore. It represented potential consumer safety violations that could trigger regulatory action. I prepared a comprehensive analysis and requested an urgent meeting with Dominic. He rescheduled twice before finally agreeing to a brief discussion where he barely glanced at my findings. "We're aware of these variations," he said dismissively. "They're within acceptable parameters." "They're not," I insisted. "The clustering pattern indicates systematic failure. We need to halt production and investigate." His expression darkened. "That would cost millions and alarm the board unnecessarily. This stays within the department until we have more data." "But consumers could." "That's my final decision," he interrupted. "Your persistence on this is concerning, Linnea. Perhaps we should discuss your fit within this team." The threat was unmistakable. The next morning, I received the email scheduling my performance review for 7 a.m. with the subject line, "Comprehensive Performance Evaluation, Mandatory Attendance." The body contained just one line. Early scheduling ensures privacy for what will likely be an emotional conversation. When I showed the email to Veda, her face paled. He sent Thalia a similar message before she left. That evening, I made my decision. I compiled every document, email, and recording I'd collected over 6 months. I organized them into 3 categories: personal harassment, professional sabotage, and most critically, the production quality cover-up. After reviewing everything twice, I sent the entire package to 3 recipients: the company's legal counsel, the board's ethics committee, and Alara in HR. My message was simple. I believe these documents show a pattern of behavior that violates company policies and potentially regulations governing product safety. I'm scheduled for a 7 a.m. performance review tomorrow that I have reason to believe will result in my termination based on fabricated performance issues. I request immediate intervention. I sent it at 8:42 p.m. By 9:17, I received a brief response from Alara. Received. Do not discuss with anyone. Attend the meeting as scheduled. That night, I barely slept. I prepared for the worst: unemployment, a damaged reputation, potential retaliation. I rehearsed what I would say when Dominic tried to fire me. I updated my resume and packed my personal items in a small bag, ready to walk out with dignity. What I didn't prepare for was what actually happened. As I stood in that conference room at 7 a.m., watching Alara hand me that envelope while security positioned themselves near Dominic, I felt something unexpected, not triumph or relief, but a strange hollowness mixed with validation. The envelope contained a letter acknowledging receipt of my evidence, confirmation that an investigation had begun immediately upon my email's arrival, and most surprisingly, a temporary reassignment to work directly with the executive team on a special project. "What is the meaning of this?" Dominic demanded. Standing so abruptly, his chair rolled backward. Alara turned to him, her expression professional but unyielding. "Dominic, we need to continue this conversation in my office. Security will escort you." "This is ridiculous," he sputtered, looking from Alara to me. "Whatever she's told you is fabricated. Her work has been substandard since she arrived. I have documentation." "Yes," Alara interrupted. "We've reviewed your documentation. We've also reviewed the unaltered originals she provided. The discrepancies are concerning." The color drained from Dominic's face. "You can't possibly—" "We've also received the production quality reports," Alara continued. "Both versions. The board has ordered an immediate halt to production line 3 pending investigation." Understanding dawned in his eyes. His gaze snapped to me, no longer dismissive but filled with something new: fear. "Please proceed to my office," Alara said firmly. "Linnea, Wynn from the executive office will meet you upstairs in 15 minutes. Take some time if you need it." As security escorted Dominic out, he turned back once. "This isn't over," he said, quiet enough that only I could hear. But looking into his eyes, I knew differently. It was over. For him. If you've ever experienced workplace bullying or watched someone abuse their power, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps share these stories that too often remain hidden in professional settings. Click the notification bell to follow more workplace justice stories, because knowing you're not alone can make all the difference when you're fighting an unfair battle. What happened next shocked even me. The investigation revealed patterns I hadn't fully understood, connections that explained Dominic's behavior, and consequences that would reshape the entire company. But most importantly, it taught me about power, both the kind that destroys and the kind that heals. After security escorted Dominic away, I sat alone in the conference room, hands trembling slightly as I reread the letter. The silence felt strange after months of constant anxiety. Part of me couldn't believe what had just happened, that someone had actually listened and taken action. Wynn, the executive director's assistant, arrived precisely 15 minutes later. She had a quiet confidence I immediately respected. "The board is meeting an emergency session," she explained. "They'd like you to present your findings directly." Walking through the executive floor felt surreal. 12 hours earlier, I'd been preparing for termination. Now I was being ushered into a room where company decisions affecting thousands of employees were made. 8 people sat around the table, including the CEO, Meredith. I recognized most from company announcements but had never met them personally. For 90 minutes, they asked detailed questions about my documentation. I explained the production line issues, showing the statistical patterns and potential consequences. "Why didn't you bring this to us sooner?" asked one board member. "I followed protocol," I replied, maintaining eye contact. "I reported to my supervisor first. When he dismissed the concerns, I gathered more evidence before escalating." Meredith nodded. "You did everything correctly. What concerns me is how many others might have been silenced before reaching this point. The investigation moved with unexpected speed. By afternoon, they'd interviewed Veda and Archer. By evening, they'd spoken with 6 former employees who had worked under Dominic. 2 days later, I learned the full extent of what they discovered. Alara invited me to her office, where Meredith joined us. "We've uncovered something systematic," Alara began. "Dominic maintained 2 sets of personnel files, the official ones in our system and private ones he kept encrypted on his personal drive." Meredith continued. "His private files contained altered performance metrics, manipulated peer feedback, and edited meeting recordings. He specifically targeted employees with high potential ratings from previous managers." "But why?" I asked. "What possible benefit?" "Department performance bonuses," Alara explained. "Our compensation structure rewards departments that improve year over year. If Dominic drove out high performers before they could contribute significantly, he could bring in replacements, set them up to underperform, then gradually improve their metrics. This created the appearance of successful leadership," Meredith added. "His department always showed improvement curves that impressed senior leadership, but the baseline was artificially lowered first." "That's disturbingly calculated," I said. "It gets worse," Alara replied. "The production quality issues you identified connect directly to his bonus structure. The quarterly quality metrics affected his performance evaluation. By hiding the problems, he maintained his perfect record." I felt sick. "So he risked consumer safety for a bonus?" "Approximately $87,000 annually," Meredith confirmed. "We've identified 16 employees over 4 years who experienced similar treatment. 4 filed complaints that were mysteriously resolved with minimal investigation." "How was this missed for so long?" I asked. Meredith's expression darkened. "He had protection. The previous HR manager was his university classmate. We're investigating whether that relationship compromised earlier complaints." The next week brought rapid changes. Dominic was terminated, of course. The company issued a formal apology to me and the other affected employees. Production Line 3 underwent complete reevaluation, resulting in a voluntary recall of products, costly but necessary. Most surprisingly, I was asked to lead a new internal quality assurance team reporting directly to the board, bypassing the traditional management structure. My first assignment: review all departments for similar patterns. Archer approached me in the break room a few days later. "I should have spoken up," he said quietly, "when he claimed my non-existent framework was the basis for your proposal. I knew it was wrong." "Fear is a powerful silencer," I replied. "He cultivated it deliberately. He told me once that I was on a performance improvement plan, but it never appeared in my official file," Archer continued. "He used it to justify excluding me from projects. I believed I was failing." Similar conversations followed with other colleagues. Patterns emerged of isolation, manipulated feedback, and psychological tactics designed to create self-doubt. Dominic hadn't just targeted potential rivals. He'd created an environment where everyone felt vulnerable and no one trusted their own perceptions. 2 weeks after that morning confrontation, I received a message from Thalia, one of Dominic's previous victims. She wanted to meet for coffee. We sat at a quiet cafe near the office. She looked nothing like her company photo, more confident, more present. When HR contacted me about Dominic, I couldn't believe someone finally caught him. She began. "I've been following the recall announcement. That was your discovery?" I nodded, though I never expected it would lead to all this. "I found quality issues too," she revealed. "In an earlier production line. When I brought it to Dominic, he explained them away. Then my performance reviews suddenly tanked. I started questioning my own competence." "That's exactly what he did to me," I said. "I heard you kept records," she said. "Smart, I wish I had." "It wasn't strategy initially," I admitted. "Just instinct." Thalia smiled. "Well, your instincts changed everything. The company called me yesterday with a formal apology and an offer to return with back compensation for lost bonuses. 4 others received similar calls." I felt a ripple of satisfaction. "Are you considering it?" "Actually, yes. The new management structure sounds promising." She hesitated. there's something else you should know. After I left, I reported my concerns about the production quality to the Consumer Protection Agency. My eyes widened. You did? Anonymous tip. They opened a preliminary investigation but closed it when they couldn't access internal documents. With the voluntary recall, they've reopened the case. The implications hit me. Dominic could face regulatory penalties, not just termination. Exactly. Regulatory violations follow you forever in this industry. Thalia's expression held no sympathy. Some actions deserve permanent consequences. When I returned to the office, Alara was waiting for me. We've received notice of a regulatory investigation, she said. They're specifically requesting all communications from Dominic regarding production quality over the past 3 years. What does that mean for the company? I asked. We're cooperating fully. The voluntary recall helps our position. The focus seems to be on individual accountability rather than corporate penalties. She studied my expression. You don't seem surprised. I suspected it might happen, I answered truthfully. The violations were serious. Well, there's more. The board reviewed our communication protocols after this incident. We're implementing a new anonymous reporting system that bypasses direct supervisors. She handed me a folder. They'd like you to oversee its development. The following months transformed the company culture. The new reporting system identified 2 other managers with concerning patterns, though none as severe as Dominic's. Mandatory training programs on psychological safety and ethical leadership were implemented. Most importantly, employees who had left under suspicious circumstances were contacted and offered reconciliation. 3 months after that 7 a.m. meeting, I received an unexpected email from a law firm representing Dominic. He was seeking a letter of reference as part of a settlement negotiation with the company. In exchange, he would drop potential claims of defamation. I forwarded it to legal without responding. Their reply was swift. The company will not be providing references nor entertaining settlement discussions regarding factual reporting of documented misconduct. Later that day, I learned Dominic had taken a position with a smaller competitor in another state, one apparently unaware of the regulatory investigation. 2 weeks after that, the regulatory findings became public record. The competitor terminated him immediately. The most meaningful moment came 6 months after that fateful morning. Meredith called me into her office and slid a folder across her desk. The board approved a new executive position focusing on workplace integrity and quality assurance. We'd like you to consider it. The role represented everything I'd fought for: accountability, transparency, and systematic protection against abuse of power. It also came with resources to implement real change. Why me? I asked. There must be people with more experience. Experience isn't what we need, Meredith replied. We need someone who recognized a systemic problem, documented it methodically, and had the courage to report it despite personal risk. Someone who demonstrated integrity when it was hardest to do so. I accepted the position the next day. 1 year after Dominic scheduled that 7 a.m. meeting, our company received an industry award for ethical leadership. The production line issues had been fully resolved, with enhanced quality control processes that became the new standard. 5 of Dominic's previous targets had returned to the company in advanced positions. As for Dominic himself, the regulatory penalties included a 5-year industry ban. His professional reputation never recovered. I heard through industry contacts that he eventually took a position far below his qualifications in an unrelated field. The systematic destruction he had inflicted on others' careers ultimately became the blueprint for his own downfall. The sweetest part? I never once had to lie, exaggerate, or manipulate. I simply preserved the truth he tried to bury and ensured it reached those who needed to see it. His own actions did the rest. In my new executive role, I established a mentoring program specifically designed for employees recovering from workplace trauma. We called it the Phoenix Program, helping people rebuild confidence after having it systematically dismantled. Thalia became one of our first mentors. During a leadership conference where I presented our new ethics framework, someone asked if I felt satisfied with how everything resolved. Justice and revenge aren't the same thing, I answered. I didn't want revenge. I wanted protection for myself and others. I wanted accountability. The fact that his own actions led to his downfall wasn't my goal, but it was perhaps the most fitting conclusion. Afterward, a young manager approached me. "I'm currently documenting a similar situation in my department," she whispered. "Hearing your story gives me courage." That's when I realized the true impact wasn't just about one toxic supervisor being removed. It was about breaking a cycle of silence that protects workplace abusers. It was about creating a blueprint for others to follow. The company culture transformed. Employees now regularly share concerns without fear. Managers understand that building others up rather than tearing them down leads to better outcomes for everyone. Most importantly, no one starts their day with the dread I experienced for those 6 months. The early morning meeting Dominic scheduled to break me became the catalyst for rebuilding not just my career, but an entire workplace ecosystem. His words, "Nobody will hear you cry," proved prophetic in a way he never intended. There were no tears that morning, only the sound of justice finally arriving. And it all began because I trusted my instincts enough to document everything, even before I understood why. Have you ever witnessed or experienced workplace bullying? How did you handle it? The sad reality is that many people suffer in silence, unaware of their options or afraid of consequences. Share your experiences or thoughts in the comments below. Your story might give someone else the courage they need. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We share these real-life experiences because workplace justice matters, and sometimes seeing someone else stand up to abuse is exactly what we need to find our own courage. Click the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming stories about overcoming workplace challenges and finding your professional power. Remember, documentation is your strongest ally. The truth, preserved carefully, has power that manipulation can never match. I stood frozen in my boss's office. The religious holiday request form crumpled in his fist as he leaned across his desk. "We can't approve time off for everyone's special days," Devin sneered, tossing the paper back at me. "The Johnson account needs all hands on deck next week." My throat tightened as 23 previous denials flashed through my mind. 7 years at this company, and my one sacred day remained an annual battle, while coworkers took days off for concerts and spa weekends without question. The rejection stung deeper this time. I'd submitted the request 11 weeks in advance with documentation from my faith leader. I gathered the wrinkled form with steady hands, meeting Devin's dismissive gaze. "This observance happens once yearly. I've never missed a deadline or quota." His expression hardened. "Religious mumbo-jumbo doesn't generate revenue, Adamina. Be a team player or reconsider your priorities." As I turned to leave, he added, "The Johnson call is scheduled for 10 a.m. that day. Your presentation section cannot be delegated." What Devin didn't know? I'd already set in motion a plan that would expose years of systematic discrimination, and his career wouldn't survive what came next. Before I tell you how I finally achieved justice after years of religious discrimination, I want to thank you for clicking on this video. My story touches on workplace rights many of us hesitate to defend. If you've ever felt your identity diminished at work, this journey will resonate with you. I'm sharing every raw detail because the tactics used against me might be happening to you or someone you know right now. Stay until the end to discover how documentation became my most powerful weapon and how one calculated response changed everything. If this story helps even one person stand up for their rights, please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps others find this channel who might need this information desperately. My name is Adamina Whitley, Senior Marketing Strategist with a specialty in international campaigns. I've built my career on attention to detail, creative problem solving, and an ability to bridge cultural divides. My grandmother taught me our family's traditional practices when I was young, and those sacred observances became my anchor through college, early career struggles, and eventually my success at integrated dynamics marketing. My faith isn't flashy or evangelical. It's private, centered on reflection and gratitude. My yearly holy day is the cornerstone of my spiritual practice, requiring uninterrupted prayer and family gathering. I don't discuss it much at work, but it's noted in my personnel file and annual calendar. When I joined Integrated Dynamics, I was transparent about my religious observance during the hiring process. The HR manager assured me the company valued diversity and would accommodate my needs. For the first year, that promise held true. My holy day request was approved without issue, and I returned to work refreshed and more productive. Everything changed when Devin Harper became department head 3 months into my second year. A newcomer to the company with connections to the CEO, he immediately implemented productivity optimization protocols. Vacation requests now required justification forms. Personal days needed 2-week advance notice. Religious accommodations faced unprecedented scrutiny. My first religious holiday request under Devin's leadership was denied, citing operational needs. I appealed to HR, who reluctantly overrode him the day before my observance. Devin scheduled a critical meeting during my absence, then questioned my commitment in my performance review. Your unavailability during peak periods is concerning, he noted in my file, despite my consistent overtime and weekend work throughout the year. The pattern continued. Each year, my initial request would be denied. Each year, I'd fight through administrative appeals. Each year, Devin found subtle ways to penalize my absence, reassigning clients, excluding me from projects, scheduling important events on my holy day. Meanwhile, my colleagues received time off for weddings, birthdays, even concert tickets. Trey took 3 days for a baseball tournament. Vanessa got a week for her dog's surgery recovery. Devin himself took random Fridays for golf outings. The disparity became impossible to ignore. I began documenting everything, every denial, every approved request for others, every comment suggesting bias. I saved emails where Devin praised team members for weekend work while ignoring my late nights. I recorded dates when similar requests received different responses. I noted which projects were assigned or withdrawn following my religious accommodation requests. By year 4, the pattern was undeniable. I considered legal action but feared being labeled difficult. Instead, I excelled at my work, earning client praise and exceeding targets. I became too valuable to dismiss outright, but Devin's subtle discrimination continued. The situation reached breaking point in my 7th year. The Johnson account, a potential multi-million-dollar client, became our department's focus. As the only team member with experience in their industry, I led the strategy development, working evenings and weekends for months. When the calendar for client presentations was released, I immediately noticed the final pitch was scheduled on my holy day, 11 weeks away. That same day, I submitted my religious accommodation request with extensive documentation, a letter from my faith leader, previous year's approved requests, and a detailed transition plan for my responsibilities. The next morning, Devin called me into his office. "This timing is unfortunate," he said, tapping my request form. "But the Johnson presentation date is fixed. Everyone needs to be present." "I've provided 11 weeks' notice," I replied. "My portion can be presented by Kieran or Zoe. Both are familiar with the strategy." Devin's expression hardened. "Nobody knows this material like you do. The client expects to meet the strategy architect. I've created detailed handover notes, and I'm happy to record a video introduction." "That's not the same as being there, Adamina. This is our biggest opportunity this year. I understand the importance, which is why I've planned so thoroughly for my absence." Devin leaned back. "Your absence patterns are becoming problematic. Not everyone gets days off for their special occasions." "This isn't a special occasion, it's a religious observance protected by workplace equality laws. We can't approve time off for everyone's special days." He snapped, crumpling my request form. "The Johnson account needs all hands on deck. Religious mumbo-jumbo doesn't generate revenue. Be a team player or reconsider your priorities." I gathered the wrinkled form with steady hands. "I'll speak with HR." "Do what you need to," he replied dismissively. "The Johnson call is scheduled for 10 a.m. that day. Your presentation section cannot be delegated." HR was sympathetic, but ineffective. "Devin has final approval on his team's scheduling," they explained. "We can only advise him to reconsider." With my options dwindling, I noticed Marielle Owens, our Chief Operating Officer, attending a company training session. During a break, I approached her carefully. "Excuse me, Ms. Owens. I have a sensitive workplace matter I'd appreciate your guidance on." She gestured to an empty conference room. What's happening, Adamina? I presented my documentation chronologically, 7 years of religious accommodation requests, the pattern of initial denials, the contrast with other approved time-off requests, and the coincidental scheduling of critical events on my holy day. I've never missed deadlines. I work overtime regularly, but my one religious observance day each year has become increasingly difficult to protect. I explained. I'm concerned this pattern constitutes religious discrimination. Marielle reviewed the evidence silently, her expression growing more concerned with each page. This is troubling. How long have you been documenting this? 4 years. I hoped the pattern would improve without escalation. She closed the folder. I'll address this personally. Continue preparing your transition notes for the Johnson presentation, but consider your religious day approved. 2 days later, my leave request appeared on my desk, approved and signed by Marielle herself with a note. Religious observances are protected. Please enjoy your holy day without interruption. I submitted the approved form to HR without mentioning it to Devin. The weeks passed with intense preparation for the Johnson presentation. I created comprehensive notes, recorded a video walkthrough of my slides, and trained both Kieran and Zoe on my portion. The day before my holy day, Devin stopped by my desk. Final run-through for Johnson tomorrow at 9 a.m., presentation at 10. Don't be late. As documented in the team calendar, I'll be observing my religious holiday tomorrow, I reminded him. His smile thinned. Your request wasn't approved. It was approved by the COO 3 weeks ago. HR has the documentation. Devin's expression flickered between surprise and anger. We'll discuss this in the morning, he said, walking away before I could respond. I arrived home that evening to prepare for my holy day. I turned off email notifications and set my phone to emergency contacts only. My family gathered, and we began our evening rituals, entering the peaceful space I'd fought so hard to protect. At 8:47 the next morning, as I sat in meditation with my grandmother's prayer beads, my watch vibrated. A message from Devin, team meeting in progress, where are you? I silenced it and continued my prayers. At 9:22, another message. Johnson representatives are arriving. Your absence is unprofessional. At 9:58, the most demanding, where are you? The Johnson call is critical. 2 more messages followed in quick succession, growing increasingly panicked. After the 5th message, I took a photo of my approved leave form and sent it with a simple reply. As documented, I'm observing my religious holiday today. The COO approved my leave 3 weeks ago. I silenced my device completely and returned to my family gathering, determined to honor the day's meaning without further interruption. That evening, I found 5 voicemails from Devin, each more desperate than the last. Adamina, the meeting's starting. Call immediately. This absence is unacceptable. The clients are asking for you specifically. I don't know what game you're playing, but your career won't survive this. The presentation is falling apart without your section. Call me now. The final message came hours later, his voice noticeably subdued. The Johnson representatives have left. They were displeased with our presentation. We'll discuss your actions tomorrow. I also found an email from Marielle. Please see me first thing when you return to the office. Documentation of today's events may be necessary. The next morning, I dressed carefully and gathered my evidence binder before driving to work. The office atmosphere was tense as I walked to Marielle's office. Thank you for coming, she said, gesturing to a chair. I've received concerning reports about yesterday's Johnson presentation. What happened? I asked. The presentation proceeded without you, but during questioning, Johnson's CEO asked specifically about the international strategy components or your section. Devin explained your absence was due to a personal religious day that had been sprung on the team last minute. My heart sank. That's completely false. I submitted my request 11 weeks in advance. I'm aware, Marielle said. Unfortunately, Johnson's CEO, Eliana Johnson, is known for her interfaith advocacy work. She was troubled by Devin's characterization and asked whether accommodating religious diversity was challenging for our company. I waited, sensing there was more. Devin apparently responded that while the company tries to accommodate personal preferences, business priorities must sometimes take precedence over optional observances. He said what? I couldn't hide my shock. Ms. Johnson ended the meeting early. This morning, we received notification that Johnson Enterprises will not be proceeding with our proposal, citing concerns about our company culture and diversity practices. I sat in stunned silence. What's more, Marielle continued, I've discovered your approved leave was deliberately omitted from the team calendar, and the final presentation was rescheduled to your holy day after your request was submitted, not before, as Devin claimed. She slid a document across the desk. This is an internal investigation report revealing Devin had deliberately forgotten to put your approved leave on the team calendar and had scheduled the critical client call on your holy day, specifically to prove you weren't team-oriented. We've also uncovered emails to other managers characterizing your religious practice as inconvenient theatrics. I felt a complex mix of vindication and grief. Years of subtle discrimination were finally acknowledged, but at what cost to the company? I never wanted to cause problems, I said quietly. I just wanted equal respect for my religious practices. You didn't cause this problem, Marielle assured me. Devin's discriminatory behavior did, and it's cost us a major client. But more importantly, it violated our values and potentially the law. She handed me another document. The executive team met this morning. Devin has been removed from his position, effective immediately. We'd like to offer you the department director role. I stared at the offer letter. Me? Your work has been exceptional for 7 years. Your team respects you. And most importantly, you understand the value of diversity and inclusion, not just as buzzwords, but as practical leadership principles. We need someone who will ensure this never happens again. When I returned to my desk, I found my team gathered nearby, expressions anxious. Is everything okay? Zoe asked. We heard about the Johnson account. I took a deep breath. There are going to be some changes. I gathered my team in the conference room an hour later. Uncertainty hung between us. The Johnson account loss had sent ripples through the department. First, I want to thank you all for your hard work on the Johnson proposal, I began. What happened yesterday wasn't a reflection of your efforts. We heard Devin is gone, Kieran said, voicing what everyone was thinking. Yes, effective immediately. I've been appointed department director. The room fell silent before erupting in surprised congratulations. These people had witnessed my struggles under Devin's leadership without fully understanding the discrimination I'd faced. Why did we lose Johnson? Zoe asked once the noise settled. Their team seemed excited about our strategy. I paused, considering how much to share. The presentation revealed some fundamental issues in our departmental culture. Ms. Johnson was concerned about our commitment to inclusion. Trey frowned. Because you weren't there? Not exactly. It was how my absence was explained, and why it happened in the first place. I took a deep breath and decided transparency was necessary for true change. For years, I've faced obstacles getting time off for my religious observance day, while similar requests from others were routinely approved. Yesterday's presentation was deliberately scheduled on my holy day despite my advance notice. Shock registered on their faces. That's discrimination, Kieran said quietly. Yes, and it cost us the Johnson account. I had no idea, Zoe whispered. You never complained. I documented everything instead, I replied, which is why we're having this conversation now. I outlined my vision for the department: transparent scheduling, equitable time-off policies, and respect for diversity in all forms. I wanted team members to bring their whole selves to work without fear of penalty. Does anyone have questions? I asked. What happens to Devin? Trey asked. He remains with the company in another capacity, I answered carefully. What I didn't share was what Marielle had told me privately. Devin's contract prevents immediate termination without a performance improvement plan. He'll be reassigned to the analytics team, reporting directly to you. The next morning, Devin arrived to find his office nameplate replaced with mine. He stood in the hallway, briefcase clutched tightly, as staff avoided his gaze. Adamina, there's been a misunderstanding, he said when I approached. We should discuss this privately. I gestured to my formerly his office. Come in. Devin took a seat across from me, his typical confidence noticeably diminished. This Johnson situation has been blown completely out of proportion. Has it? I opened the investigation file. You deliberately scheduled our most important presentation on my religious holiday after my leave was approved by the COO. That was a legitimate business decision. The client specifically cited our handling of diversity as their reason for walking away. I interrupted. Their CEO is an interfaith advocate who was appalled by your comments. Devin's expression hardened. So you've won. Got my job, made your point. What happens now? Now you have a choice. You've been reassigned to the analytics team as a senior data specialist, reporting to me. That's a demotion, he protested. It's an opportunity to remain employed despite documented discrimination that exposed the company to legal liability. Devin leaned forward. You've been building a case against me for years. I've been protecting myself through documentation for years, I corrected. There's a difference. He stood abruptly. I won't work under someone who... Who what? I challenged. Someone who earned their position through excellence despite obstacles? Someone who understands the value of diverse perspectives? Or someone who simply expects equal treatment under company policy and the law? Devin fell silent. Your new desk is in the analytics section. Orientation begins at 10 a.m. After he left, I released a breath I'd been holding for 7 years. The power dynamics had shifted, but revenge wasn't my goal. Systemic change was. Over the next weeks, I implemented new policies with Marielle's full support. We created a transparent calendar system where all time-off requests, religious, personal, or vacation, followed the same approval process. No manager could unilaterally deny time off without HR review. Most importantly, we established mandatory training on religious accommodation laws and inclusive leadership. When Devin attempted to undermine these changes through back-channel complaints to his executive friends, Marielle shut it down immediately. The documentation speaks for itself, she told him in a meeting I attended. You're fortunate to remain employed here. I suggest focusing on your new role rather than relitigating the past. Devin's resistance eventually gave way to grudging compliance. He performed his analytics duties adequately but avoided team gatherings and kept interaction minimal. When he did speak to me, it was with cold professionalism that barely masked his resentment. 3 months into my leadership, an unexpected opportunity arose. Eliana Johnson, CEO of Johnson Enterprises, requested a meeting with our executive team. She was impressed by how quickly we addressed the situation, Marielle explained. She wants to discuss potentially working together after all. During the meeting, Ms. Johnson spoke candidly about why she'd walked away from our proposal. When your former director dismissed religious accommodation as optional, it raised serious concerns about your company values, she explained. But your response, promoting the person who stood her ground and implementing systemic changes, demonstrated integrity. She turned to me. I understand you're now leading the department? Yes, I confirmed. We've made significant changes to ensure all team members receive equal respect for their identities and needs. I'd like to hear more about those changes, she said, and discuss reviving our partnership with your team at the helm. 2 weeks later, we signed a contract with Johnson Enterprises, larger than the original proposal. Our team celebrated the win, and I noticed even Devin seemed impressed, despite himself. As months passed, our department thrived under the new inclusive approach. Team members began sharing aspects of their identities they'd previously kept hidden: cultural traditions, family responsibilities, personal challenges. Productivity increased as people felt more fully accepted. Ironically, the religious discrimination I'd experienced led to improvements benefiting everyone. A pregnant team member received better accommodations. A colleague caring for an ailing parent got flexible scheduling. Another team member's cultural New Year celebration received the same respect as Christmas holidays. 8 months into my leadership role, time-off request forms for the upcoming quarter arrived on my desk. Among them was Devin's, requesting 3 days for a golf tournament, the same days as our quarterly planning session. I remembered all the times he'd denied my single day of religious observance while approving similar recreational requests for others. how simple it would be to reject his request, citing operational needs as he'd done to me repeatedly. Instead, I approved it and adjusted the planning session schedule. When I returned the signed form, Devin looked surprised. "This is approved?" "Yes. Everyone deserves time for what matters to them. Even though it's just golf? What matters to you doesn't need to matter to me to be respected," I replied. "That's the point you missed all those years." Something shifted in his expression, not quite gratitude, but recognition. 2 weeks later, he stopped by my office. "I've been reviewing our demographic data for the client satisfaction report," he said, placing a folder on my desk. "There's something interesting you should see." The analysis showed our client retention had improved 22% since implementing inclusive policies. New client acquisition from diverse ownership backgrounds had increased 31%. "These numbers are significant," I noted. "They are," Devin agreed. "It appears your approach has measurable business benefits beyond the ethical considerations." Coming from him, this was monumental acknowledgement. "Thank you for highlighting this," I said. "Would you present these findings at the next executive meeting?" He seemed taken aback by the opportunity. "If you think that would be appropriate." "I do. The data speaks for itself, and you understand the analytics better than anyone." After Devin left, I reflected on how far we'd come. His presentation to executives the following week was thorough and professional. He presented the business case for inclusion without personal commentary, letting the numbers tell the story of our department's transformation. As my annual holy day approached again, I submitted my time-off request, still documenting everything out of ingrained habit. The difference was, I now signed my own approval, with a backup plan already in place for my absence. The day before my observance, Devin stopped by my office. "I'll be covering the client call tomorrow while you're out," he said, referencing the responsibility chart I'd created. "Thank you," I replied. "All the materials are in the shared folder." He hesitated in the doorway. "Your religious day, it's important to you." It wasn't quite a question. "Yes," I said simply. "It connects me to my heritage, my family, and my values." He nodded. "I'll make sure everything runs smoothly." The next morning, as I sat in prayer with my family, my phone remained blissfully silent. No panicked messages, no manufactured emergencies. For the first time in 8 years, I observed my holy day in complete peace, present with my loved ones and our traditions. When I returned to work, I discovered everything had proceeded perfectly in my absence. Devin had handled the client call professionally and even resolved an issue without escalation. "How was your day off?" Zoe asked as I settled back at my desk. "Exactly what it should be," I replied, uninterrupted. 6 months later, Marielle called me to her office. "The executive team has been reviewing our progress," she said. "The changes in your department have been remarkable. Improved performance, higher retention, and stronger client relationships." "The team deserves the credit," I replied. "They embraced the changes wholeheartedly. Not everyone would have succeeded in your position, especially with your former boss now reporting to you. That required exceptional leadership." She slid a document across her desk. "We're expanding our diversity initiatives company-wide. We'd like you to lead the effort as our new Chief Inclusion Officer, reporting directly to the CEO." I stared at the offer, momentarily speechless. "This is because of your results, not your identity," Marielle clarified, "though your personal experience has clearly informed your leadership approach." "What about my current department?" "You'd oversee the transition to a new director. We have someone in mind who's demonstrated similar values." "Who?" I asked, curious. "Devin Harper." I couldn't hide my surprise. "Devin? He's undergone a significant transformation under your leadership. His recent presentation to the board about inclusion metrics was impressively data-driven. And he's completed every optional training module on cultural competence." "That's true," I acknowledged, "but given his history." "People can change when held accountable," Marielle said. "You'd still oversee all departmental policies in your new role, and he's explicitly committed to maintaining the inclusive systems you've built." I considered the symmetry of it, Devin taking over my role after I took over his. But this time, the department had been fundamentally transformed. The systems now protected everyone, regardless of who led them. 1 year to the day after Devin had crumpled my religious accommodation request in his fist, I sat in the executive boardroom as the newly appointed Chief Inclusion Officer. Across the table sat Devin, now Department Director, presenting our quarterly results. Religious and cultural accommodation requests are up 40% since implementing transparent policies, he reported. This indicates employees feel safer expressing their needs. Meanwhile, productivity has increased 27%, and unplanned absences have decreased 35%. He paused, making eye contact with me. The data conclusively shows that respecting employees' whole identities creates measurable business advantages beyond the obvious ethical imperatives. After the meeting, Devin approached me in the hallway. "I've been meaning to say something to you," he said, his typical bravado absent. What I did, the discrimination, the scheduling tactics, all of it was wrong. I've spent a year working under the systems you created, seeing the results firsthand. "Are you apologizing?" I asked, surprised. "Yes, unequivocally. I made decisions based on prejudice disguised as business needs. You've proven those assumptions entirely false." I nodded, accepting his words. "Thank you for saying that." "Your holy day is coming up next week," he noted. "Everything's prepared for your absence. The team won't even need to contact you." "That's how it should have been all along," I said. He nodded. "I understand that now." As I walked away, I realized my revenge hadn't been taking Devin's job or making him report to me. It hadn't even been exposing his discrimination to company leadership. My true revenge was transforming the entire system so completely that even Devin, the architect of my previous struggles, now advocated for the very accommodations he once denied me. When my holy day arrived the following week, I observed it in perfect peace, surrounded by family, without a single work interruption. My phone remained silent by choice, not necessity. My religious practice was finally respected as essential, not optional. The most powerful revenge wasn't punishment. It was creating lasting change that made discrimination impossible to perpetuate, even by those who once weaponized it. My grandmother, watching me pray with genuine peace for the first time in years, squeezed my hand. "You seem different this year," she observed. "Lighter." I smiled. "I am. I finally have what I always wanted, not special treatment, just equal respect." That, ultimately, was the greatest victory of all. If my story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories of workplace justice and empowerment. Have you ever stood up against discrimination at work? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might give someone else the courage to speak up. Remember, documentation is power. Even when it feels like nothing is changing, keep building your case. Change might come slowly, but when it does, it can transform entire systems. Thank you for listening to my journey from discrimination to leadership. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better and creating change that lifts everyone up. The rain drummed against the tent covering my father's casket. Each drop echoed the hollowness spreading through my chest. As mourners dispersed, leaving me alone with my grief, I noticed him approaching Elliot, the CEO's son, impeccably dressed despite the downpour. He adjusted his gold cufflinks, eyes scanning the empty chairs before landing on me. "Adira," he said, voice soft but edges sharp. "Just wanted to say personally, take all the time you need for your healing process." His pause was deliberate. "The team can manage without you. We don't actually need you back." The words penetrated deeper than my grief. 20 years my father had given to that company. 2 years I devoted myself to our shared vision. The project I started is being handled. Elliot cut in, a smile forming. "Your father's notes were adequate. I've taken personal control of the manufacturing client. Don't worry your pretty head." He placed his hand on my shoulder, leaning close. "Between us, your position was always a courtesy to your father. Now that he's gone." He straightened his tie. "Well, priorities shift." As he walked away, droplets sliding off his expensive coat, something hardened inside me. Through tears, I watched him slide into his luxury car, already on his phone, laughing. I placed my hand on Dad's casket. "I promise," I whispered. "They'll learn exactly how much they need me." Before I share how I dismantled an entire company's leadership with nothing but my father's teachings and pure determination, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next proves that sometimes, revenge isn't just sweet, it's necessary. My name is Adira Levente, and until 2 months ago, I was the youngest systems architect at Bluecrest Engineering Consultancy. My father, Leo Levente, had been their genius problem solver for 2 decades, the quiet mastermind who turned failing industrial systems into profit machines. I'd grown up watching him sketch designs at our kitchen table, falling asleep to his gentle explanations of fluid dynamics and optimization algorithms. When I graduated with dual masters in systems engineering and sustainable design, joining him at Bluecrest felt inevitable. What wasn't inevitable was how quickly I'd become orphaned and unemployed. Dad and I had been working on something revolutionary, a complete efficiency overhaul for Meridian Manufacturing, Bluecrest's biggest client. Our process would cut their energy consumption by 40% while increasing output by 25%. Dad handled client relations while I perfected the technical aspects. We kept the full methodology between us, planning to unveil it together. Then came the aneurysm. Sudden, unstoppable. Dad was gone before I could say goodbye. At the funeral, most of Bluecrest attended. Conrad Hale, the CEO, embraced me with what seemed like genuine sadness. "Your father was irreplaceable," he'd said, "but your family now." Only his son Elliot didn't bother with pretense. The rain-soaked confrontation by my father's casket revealed his true intentions. He'd been waiting for this opportunity. I took 1 week off, just 7 days to bury my father and process my grief. When I returned to the office, my keycard access had been downgraded. My project files had been moved. My desk had been relocated to a corner workstation near the supply closet. "Temporary adjustments," the office manager explained nervously. "Direct orders from Operations Director Elliot." I stared at my new desk, devoid of the research materials I'd spent months compiling. My throat tightened, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I'd barely settled when my computer pinged with a calendar invite. Project reassignment meeting, 11 a.m. In the glass-walled conference room, Elliot sat at the head of the table, though his father technically outranked him. Conrad looked uncomfortable but remained silent as Elliot outlined the new direction. "In light of recent personnel changes," Elliot said, not even looking at me, "we've restructured project assignments. Adira, you'll be handling documentation and support for the Northeast regional clients." Documentation, support, busy work that any junior engineer could handle. "The Meridian project?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I'll be taking the lead," Elliot replied. "Your father left extensive notes, and I've been studying the industry for years. The client needs stability and seniority now." Stability and seniority, from someone who'd never once set foot on a manufacturing floor. "With respect," I said carefully, "that system design isn't complete. Dad and I were developing a proprietary approach which is documented in the company files," Elliot interrupted. "It's intellectual property of Bluecrest, not the Levente family." Conrad cleared his throat. "Adira, we value your contributions, but Elliot makes a valid point. Meridian represents 40% of our annual revenue. We can't risk any hiccups." I understood then. Conrad might have respected my father, but he feared losing his biggest client more. Elliot had convinced him I was a risk, not an asset. For the next 3 weeks, I complied. I documented minor projects. I supported junior engineers. I watched from the periphery as Elliot paraded around the office, boasting about his breakthrough approach for Meridian. During weekly status meetings, I sat silently while Elliot presented fragments of my father's work as his own. He stumbled over technical details, inventing explanations that made no engineering sense. Nobody questioned him, after all. He was the CEO's son and operations director. What Elliot didn't know was that my father and I had designed the system with deliberate interdependencies. Without understanding the core algorithm, which wasn't in any of the notes, the entire system would fail catastrophically under real-world conditions. The deadline approached for Meridian's final presentation. They required proof of concept before signing the 8-figure contract renewal. With unearned confidence, Elliot promised to deliver a complete implementation plan within 2 weeks. I stayed late every night, ostensibly catching up on my assigned documentation. In reality, I was tracking Elliot's progress through the shared project management system. He was building a house of cards using only half the blueprint. On a rainy Tuesday evening, exactly 1 month after my father's funeral, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Adira Levente?" a woman's voice asked. "Speaking. This is Talia Reeves, chief engineer at Meridian Manufacturing. Your father and I worked closely for years." My heart stuttered. "Yes, I remember. He spoke highly of you." "Something feels off about the proposal we're getting from Bluecrest," she said bluntly. "The approach being presented doesn't align with what your father described to me. He always mentioned your brilliance and how you two were revolutionizing the entire methodology." I gripped the phone tighter. "Did you speak with Elliot about your concerns?" "I tried. He dismissed them as technical details to be addressed later. Our CEO is getting nervous. We're making a massive investment here." A pause stretched between us. "Would you be willing to review our requirements directly?" she finally asked. "Off the record, of course." I closed my eyes, calculating risks and possibilities. "Send them over. I'll need access to your current system schematics as well." For the next 3 days, I barely slept. At my small apartment kitchen table, the same one where my father had taught me everything I knew, I built a complete implementation plan from scratch. I incorporated all the innovations my father and I had developed, plus refinements I'd been working on since his death. My proposal would save Meridian nearly 15% more than what Bluecrest had originally promised. I highlighted critical flaws in Elliot's approach, showing precisely where and how it would fail under operational conditions. On the 4th day, I sent the completed proposal to Talia with a simple message. "This is what my father and I envisioned. Use it however you see fit." She replied within hours, "Can you be at our headquarters Friday morning? Our CEO wants to meet you." I called in sick to Bluecrest on Friday. Instead of resting at home, I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to my job interview with my father beaming proudly beside me, and headed to Meridian's headquarters. Talia met me in the lobby. "They're all upstairs," she said, "including the Bluecrest team." My stomach tightened. "They don't know I'm here." "No," she confirmed. "Our CEO, Naomi, wanted to see how their presentation played out first. You'll sit in the back. Don't say anything until we signal you." The boardroom was massive, with Meridian executives lining one side and the Bluecrest team, Conrad, Elliot, and 2 senior engineers, on the other. I slipped into a chair in the corner as Elliot stood to begin his presentation. He looked every inch the successful executive in his tailored suit, hair perfectly styled, expression confident. For nearly 40 minutes, he outlined what he called our innovative approach, fragments of my father's work cobbled together with standard industry practices. When the technical questions began, his facade cracked. He fumbled explanations, contradicted earlier statements, and grew increasingly defensive. "This cooling subsystem," Meridian's production director pointed out, "seems insufficient for your projected throughput." That's a minor calibration issue," Elliot stammered. "We'll adjust during implementation." "And these efficiency projections," another executive noted, "they don't align with the energy inputs you've outlined." Conrad jumped in to help his son. "We assure you, all calculations have been triple verified by our team." That's when Naomi Lin, Meridian's CEO, raised her hand, silencing the room. She was a small woman with commanding presence, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a precise bun. "We've reviewed an alternative proposal," she announced, nodding to her assistant who began distributing copies to everyone in the room. "My proposal. This addresses our actual needs and delivers significantly greater efficiency gains." The room fell silent as everyone flipped through the detailed document. Conrad's face drained of color as he recognized aspects of the design that went far beyond what they had prepared. "We've decided to work directly with the author," Naomi continued, turning toward the back of the room. "Ms. Levente, Would you care to join us at the table? Every head swiveled toward me as I rose from my corner seat. Elliot's expression transformed from confusion to rage as I walked to the front of the room. This is highly inappropriate, Conrad sputtered. Adira is our employee. Any work she's done belongs to Bluecrest. Actually, Naomi replied coolly, Ms. Levente developed this on her own time, using our proprietary data that we shared directly with her, at our request. But ownership isn't the issue here. She smiled thinly. We're also acquiring controlling interest in your consultancy to ensure proper implementation. Conrad paled further. Acquiring? That's impossible. We're not for sale. Your minority shareholders disagree, Naomi replied. We've already secured their support. They're quite concerned about the company's direction since Leo Levente's passing. The truth dawned on Conrad's face. Those minority shareholders were retired engineers who had worked alongside my father for years, people who had watched Elliot's rapid rise with growing concern. This is corporate theft, Elliot hissed, glaring at me. You can't just… It's business, Naomi cut him off. Your business, which has consistently delivered excellence until recently. We aim to restore that excellence. She turned to me. Adira will lead the implementation as Meridian's representative. The meeting ended abruptly after that. As everyone filed out, Elliot blocked my path, his face contorted with anger. You planned this all along, he accused. You manipulated. Take all the time you need to process this, I interrupted softly, echoing his words from my father's funeral. After all, we don't actually need you anyway. The acquisition process took exactly 2 weeks. Meridian maintained most of Bluecrest's staff, but restructured the leadership entirely. Conrad retired with a generous package, conditional on his son remaining with the company in some capacity. My first official act as the newly appointed managing director was reassigning Elliot to our remote testing facility in the desert. His official title, Legacy Systems Analyst. His job, documenting the slow decline of outdated machinery that, like him, once seemed important but proved unnecessary. He keeps his generous salary but spends his days in isolation, watching dials on equipment we'll never use again. Each month, he receives the same company-wide email showing our growing success with the implementation of my father's final vision, a legacy he tried to steal but now watches flourish from the sidelines. Last week, I visited the desert facility for a routine inspection. Elliot's office was sparse and dusty, his once immaculate appearance now careless. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. Come to gloat? He asked. I shook my head. Just ensuring company resources are being properly utilized. He laughed bitterly. Is this what you wanted? To humiliate me? To destroy everything my family built? Your family didn't build anything, I replied calmly. People like my father did. People whose contributions you dismissed. This isn't about humiliation, Elliot. It's about consequences. I placed a small framed photo on his desk. It showed my father standing proudly beside a younger me at my graduation. Keep this, I said. A reminder that every system has its breaking point when the wrong pressure is applied. As I turned to leave, he called after me. You can't keep me here forever. I paused at the doorway. I don't need to. Eventually, like these machines you're monitoring, you'll become obsolete. The only difference is, they once served a purpose. The desert sun was blinding as I walked back to my car. In the distance, the testing facility stood as a monument to outdated thinking, isolated, forgotten, yet still technically part of the company. Just like Elliot wanted for me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destruction, it's about reconstruction, building something better from the ruins of what was taken from you. My father taught me that every system can be optimized, even justice. The company thrives now, our client list growing as word spreads about our revolutionary efficiency processes. Many nights I still work at my kitchen table, refining ideas, pushing boundaries, honoring my father's legacy through innovation rather than remembrance. And sometimes, when I'm solving a particularly difficult problem, I swear I can feel him sitting across from me, pride shining in his eyes as I carry forward what he began. As for Elliot, he got exactly what he wished for. We truly don't need him anyway. If this story of corporate justice satisfied your need for sweet professional revenge, hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of underestimated people who turned the tables on those who wronged them. Share in the comments if you've ever been dismissed at work only to prove your true value later. Remember, sometimes the person they don't think they need becomes the one they can't succeed without. 6 months have passed since that desert confrontation with Elliot. The company, now rebranded as Levante Innovation Systems, has transformed from a traditional engineering consultancy into a pioneer in sustainable industrial design. Our headquarters moved from Bluecrest's sterile glass tower to a renovated warehouse with living walls and skylights that flood the workspace with natural light. It's the kind of environment my father would have loved, practical yet inspiring, where ideas flow as freely as the open floor plan allows. Most mornings, I arrive before dawn. Not from obligation, but because the quiet hours remind me of childhood mornings when Dad would let me sit beside him at his drafting table, teaching me to see the hidden patterns in seemingly chaotic systems. Engineering isn't just about machines, Adira, he'd say. It's about understanding the spaces between components, how things connect, how energy flows. Those words guide me now as I rebuild what Elliot nearly destroyed. When Meridian acquired controlling interest, they gave me considerable latitude to restructure. The first decision was surprisingly difficult: what to do with the remaining Hale influence. Conrad had taken his retirement package and disappeared to a coastal property, but Elliot remained a complicated problem. Legally, we couldn't terminate him without substantial cause, a protection his father had cleverly written into the company bylaws. The desert reassignment was the compromise that satisfied both Meridian's leadership and my own sense of justice. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly Elliot's exile would become industry gossip. Former clients called, curious about the leadership change. Competitors reached out with partnership offers, sensing opportunity in the transition. Every conversation eventually circled to the same question: what happened to the Hales? I developed a standard response. Conrad retired to pursue personal interests. Elliot remains with the company in an analytical capacity. The truth was more complex. Elliot's monthly reports from the desert facility arrived with clockwork regularity, detailed, thorough, and completely useless. He documented the degradation rates of obsolete machinery with the precision of someone who recognized he was performing the same analysis on his own career trajectory. 3 months into his assignment, he requested a transfer back to headquarters. On what basis? I asked during our video call, his face grainy against the stark white walls of his remote office. I've completed a comprehensive analysis of the legacy systems, he replied, dark circles under his eyes. There's nothing more to learn here. Then perhaps you'll finally appreciate the feeling of having your expertise dismissed, I said. Request denied. His facade cracked. This is personal vendetta, not business. No, Elliot. This is accountability. The desert facility needs supervision, and you're uniquely qualified for insignificant oversight. After ending the call, I sat in my office, my father's former office, feeling hollow despite having delivered what should have been a satisfying rebuke. Revenge was supposed to feel better than this, wasn't it? That evening, Talia Reeves from Meridian stopped by unannounced. We'd developed a solid working relationship during the acquisition, her practical engineering mind complementing my theoretical approach. You look troubled, she observed, settling into a chair across from my desk. Just tired, I deflected. Liar, she smiled. I knew your father for 15 years. He had the same expression when wrestling with an ethical problem rather than a technical one. I sighed. It's Elliot. The Desert Prince? What's he done now? Nothing. That's almost the problem. I explained our conversation and my lingering discomfort. Talia listened without interruption, then asked, what would Leo do? The question stopped me short. My father, for all his genius, had never been vindictive. He solved problems. He didn't create them. He wouldn't have sent Elliot to the desert in the first place, I admitted. Probably not, Talia agreed. But Elliot isn't you, and he's certainly not Leo. Some people only learn when consequences affect them directly. And some never learn at all, I said. True, but that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to the company, the clients, and your father's legacy. Does keeping Elliot in exile serve those priorities? I didn't have an immediate answer, which was answer enough. The next day, I called our head of product development, Preena Anand, a brilliant engineer who'd worked alongside my father for a decade. She had declined Elliot's offers of promotion multiple times during his brief leadership, preferring to remain focused on technical challenges rather than politics. I need your honest assessment, I told her. Is there any role here where Elliot could contribute without causing damage? Preena considered the question carefully. He's not without skills. His business degree and connections were useful for client acquisition. He just shouldn't be anywhere near actual engineering decisions or personnel management. So client liaison, perhaps? With strict limitations and oversight, she cautioned, and nowhere near Meridian or our other major accounts. I spent the weekend redesigning our organizational structure, creating a narrowly defined role that would utilize Elliot's business background while minimizing his potential for disruption. The position, Director of Legacy Client Relations, would focus on maintaining relationships with smaller, established clients whose projects required minimal innovation. On Monday morning, I called the desert facility. Pack your things, I told a surprised Elliot. You're being reassigned to headquarters, effective next week. His suspicion was immediate. Why the sudden change of heart? Not a change of heart, a strategic realignment of resources. When he returned, the change in him was striking. The desert sun had weathered his once smooth face, and his designer clothes hung loosely on his frame. The smirk that had once seemed permanently affixed was gone, replaced by cautious watchfulness. His new office was small but functional, positioned far from both the engineering department and executive row. His first day back, I called him in to establish ground rules. Your responsibilities are clearly outlined in this document, I said, sliding a folder across my desk. You'll handle relationship maintenance for the clients listed in Appendix A. You will not make technical promises, modify existing agreements, or initiate contact with any client not on your assigned list. He flipped through the pages, a muscle twitching in his jaw. This is busy work, glorified customer service. This is opportunity, I corrected. More than you offered me at my father's funeral. His eyes met mine, a flicker of something, perhaps recognition, passing through them. I underestimated you. A common mistake. One I won't make regarding you. I stood, indicating our meeting was concluding. Quarterly performance reviews will determine any expansion of your responsibilities. Until then, these boundaries are non-negotiable. As he turned to leave, I added, Elliot, the company name has changed to Levante Innovation Systems. Please ensure all your communications reflect that. The symmetry wasn't lost on him. His family name erased from the company, just as he'd tried to erase my family's contributions. Over the next few months, something unexpected happened. Elliot excelled within his limited role. The clients on his list reported positive interactions. His reports were thorough and timely. He arrived early, left late, and kept to himself. Preena noticed it first. He's actually trying, she remarked during our weekly leadership meeting. His client satisfaction metrics are impressive. People can surprise you, offered Damon Webb, our new head of operations. Sometimes hitting bottom is the only way to look up. I remained skeptical but couldn't deny the data. When Elliot's quarterly review arrived, his performance metrics justified a measured expansion of his responsibilities. I added 3 mid-sized clients to his portfolio and authorized him to participate in non-technical proposal developments. The day I informed him of these changes, he seemed genuinely shocked. You're serious? He asked, scanning the updated client list. Your performance earned this, I said simply. Continue on this trajectory, and further opportunities may follow. He studied me with newfound intensity. Why give me any chance at all? After what I did? The question deserved honesty, because keeping you in the desert was about my pain, not company benefit. My father built this business on recognizing potential, not punishing mistakes. Even malicious ones? Especially those, I replied. He believed people capable of calculated harm were equally capable of calculated good, given proper motivation. Something shifted in Elliot's expression. Not quite remorse, but perhaps the first recognition that actions had consequences beyond his intentions. As he left my office, I wondered if my father would approve of this approach. Redemption stories were his favorite. He collected them like other people collected art, seeing beauty in transformation. But he was also pragmatic. Trust, once broken, required more than good behavior to repair. I would watch Elliot carefully. Second chances didn't mean erased memories. As autumn approached, the company celebrated its first major milestone under the new structure, a patent for the efficiency system my father and I had developed. The entire staff gathered in the central atrium as Naomi from Meridian presented the framed patent certificate. "This innovation," she announced, "represents exactly why we invested in this company. It will transform industrial energy consumption across sectors while substantially increasing output." My name appeared first on the patent, followed by Leonardo Levente, posthumous. Seeing it displayed publicly brought unexpected tears. I accepted the frame, too emotional to speak beyond a simple thank you. Later, during the reception, I noticed Elliot standing alone by the windows, watching the celebration from a distance. Against my better judgment, I approached him. "You should be proud," he said before I could speak. "It's brilliant work." "Thank you," I replied, studying his expression for signs of insincerity but finding none. "He talked about you constantly, you know," Elliot continued, gaze fixed on the cityscape beyond the glass. "Your father, before you joined the company. Always my daughter the geniuses, this and Adira's revolutionary thinking that." He took a sip from his water glass. "I resented you before we ever met." The admission hung between us, unexpected and raw. "My father believed in my abilities," I said carefully, "but he also believed in this company, including the Hale leadership." Elliot laughed softly. "Until I proved him wrong." "People can surprise you," I echoed Damon's words. "Sometimes positively." He turned to face me fully. "Is that what I'm doing? Surprising you positively?" "The jury's still deliberating," I replied, "but the evidence is trending in your favor." We stood in awkward silence until Prina called me away to meet a potential client. As I left, Elliot spoke again. "I never apologized," he said, "for what I said at the funeral. It was cruel and unnecessary." I paused, not turning back. "Yes, it was. I'm sorry, Adira." The words were simple but delivered without expectation or qualification. I nodded once in acknowledgement before rejoining the celebration, unsure what to make of this new development. That night, alone in my apartment, I pulled out my father's journal, a leather-bound book filled with his observations and insights. I'd been reading it gradually since his death, each entry like having a new conversation with him. The passage I turned to seemed eerily relevant. Engineering Principle 17. Resilience isn't about resisting change, but about incorporating it. The most durable systems are those that can transform external pressures into internal strengths. This applies to people as much as machines. I ran my fingers over his neat handwriting, wondering if he somehow knew I would need these words. Was my willingness to give Elliot a conditional second chance a sign of resilience or weakness? Was I transforming pressure into strength, or simply setting myself up for another betrayal? The company continued its upward trajectory through winter. We secured 3 major new clients, expanded our research division, and broke ground on a testing facility that would allow us to prototype large-scale implementations. Elliot maintained his solid performance, gradually earning limited trust among the staff. In January, an unexpected opportunity arose. A struggling manufacturing conglomerate, Westerly Industries, approached us about potential acquisition. They had fallen behind technologically but possessed valuable production capabilities and client relationships. If structured correctly, acquiring them would position Levente Innovation as an end-to-end solution provider. After initial analysis, I called a leadership meeting to discuss the possibility. To everyone's surprise, I included Elliot. "You've worked with several of their subsidiaries," I explained when questioned privately by Damon. "Your insight could be valuable." The meeting lasted hours, with detailed financial and operational assessments. Throughout the discussion, Elliot remained thoughtfully engaged, offering measured contributions without overstepping. When the conversation turned to acquisition strategy, he raised his hand, a gesture so uncharacteristically humble for the formerly arrogant executive that it momentarily silenced the room. "I have a suggestion," he said cautiously, "but it involves specialized knowledge I gained working with my father." All eyes turned to me. "Go ahead," I nodded. Westerly's ownership structure includes a complicated trust arrangement established by the founder. There's a specific approach to acquisition that would minimize tax implications while protecting their existing pension obligations. He outlined a sophisticated transaction structure that addressed several concerns we'd been debating. When he finished, Prina spoke first. "That's actually brilliant. It's similar to how we acquired Rollins Engineering 6 years ago," Elliot explained. "Few people remember that deal since it was relatively small, but the structure created a template." I studied him across the conference table. "Would you be willing to lead the financial structuring team for this acquisition? Working alongside Damon, of course." The offer clearly surprised him. "You'd trust me with that level of responsibility?" "Trust is earned incrementally," I replied. "Consider this an increment." Over the next month, Elliot worked tirelessly on the acquisition strategy. His knowledge of corporate finance proved genuinely valuable, and his approach remained collaborative rather than controlling. When complications arose, as they inevitably do in complex transactions, he navigated them with unexpected grace. The day we finalized the Westerly acquisition, the leadership team gathered in my office for a small celebration. Champagne was poured, congratulations exchanged. Elliot remained somewhat apart from the group until I deliberately brought him into the conversation. "This structure will save us millions in integration costs," I acknowledged. "Well done." He accepted the compliment with a nod. "It feels good to build something rather than—" He trailed off. "Rather than tear it down?" I finished for him. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "I've been reflecting on that a lot lately." After the others departed, Elliot lingered. "Can I speak with you privately?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Of course." He sat but seemed to struggle finding words, a rare occurrence for someone once so glib. "I've received a job offer," he finally said. "CTO position at a startup across the country. The founder is an old business school classmate." This was unexpected. "I see. When would they want you to start?" "Next month, but I wanted to discuss it with you first." "Why? You don't need my permission to pursue other opportunities." He leaned forward. "Because I don't know if I should take it. Part of me thinks I should stay and continue rebuilding what I damaged. Another part thinks you'll never fully trust me again. Nor should you. And a fresh start might be best for everyone." His candor was disarming. The Elliot who had whispered cruel words at my father's funeral would never have shown such self-awareness. "What do you want, Elliot?" I asked. "Not what you think you should do, or what others might want. What do you want?" He considered the question carefully. "I want to prove to myself more than anyone that I'm not the person who did those things, that I can create value without stepping on others." "And do you need to leave to do that?" "I don't know," he admitted. "What do you think?" I thought about my father's journal, about resilience and transformation. "I think running from your mistakes is easier than facing them daily. I also think people deserve the chance to redefine themselves." "That doesn't answer my question." "No," I agreed, "because this isn't my decision to make." We sat in contemplative silence until Elliot finally stood. "Thank you for not making this easy. I have some thinking to do." As he reached the door, I called after him. "Elliot, whatever you decide, the work you did on this acquisition was genuinely valuable. That's yours to keep, regardless." 2 days later, Elliot declined the outside offer and requested a meeting with me and the leadership team. He presented a proposal for a new division focused on corporate restructuring and integration, leveraging the expertise he demonstrated during the Westerly acquisition. "This could be a significant revenue stream," he explained. "Many companies need transformation but lack the engineering and financial expertise to execute it properly." The team's response was cautiously positive. We approved a pilot program with Elliot as director, reporting directly to Damon with appropriate oversight mechanisms. As the meeting concluded, I felt a strange sense of completion. The company was thriving, expanding in directions my father would have approved. Elliot was channeling his ambition into constructive pursuits, and I had found a way to honor my father's legacy while creating my own path forward. That evening, I visited my father's grave for the first time since the funeral. The headstone was simple granite, engraved with his name, dates, and the phrase he'd often repeated: "Between every action and reaction lies opportunity." I placed fresh flowers beside it and sat on the small stone bench. "I did it, Dad," I said softly. "I protected what you built and made it stronger. But I did something else too." I paused, organizing my thoughts. I learned that revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about reconstruction, building something so much better that the past becomes irrelevant. A gentle breeze rustled the trees overhead, and for a moment, I could almost hear his laughter, the way it would bubble up from deep in his chest when something delighted him. "Elliot's still there," I continued. "Not because I need him, but because pushing him away would have made me more like him than myself. You always said the true measure of a system is how it handles unexpected inputs. I think we're handling them pretty well." As twilight deepened around me, I felt a weight-lifting grief, transforming into something lighter, more sustainable. My father was gone, but his wisdom remained, embedded in the company that now bore our name and in the principles that guided my decisions. The rain that had poured during his funeral was now nourishing new growth. The cruel words spoken beside his casket had led to a complete transformation of the company he loved. And the daughter he believed in had proven herself more capable than even he might have imagined. Some might call it justice. Others, karma. I prefer to think of it as simply good engineering, identifying structural weaknesses, applying appropriate pressure, and rebuilding stronger than before. If there's one lesson in this story worth sharing, it's this: never underestimate someone who learned resilience from a master. You might think you don't need them, only to discover they're the essential component your entire system required. Like, subscribe, and share if you've ever been underestimated only to prove your true value when it mattered most. And remember, sometimes the most powerful response to "we don't need you" is becoming exactly what they can't succeed without. "She's too ugly to keep a husband," my boss announced, waving his glass at me while addressing the entire table of colleagues. "That's why she got divorced. Look at her." The dining room fell silent. 20 coworkers stared at their plates while heat rushed to my face. 5 years at this company, and this was how he treated me after my painful divorce. That's when the door opened. A tall, striking man in an impeccable suit walked straight to me, kissed my cheek, and said, "Sorry I'm late. Gorgeous." My boss choked on his wine when he saw who it was. The universe has a strange way of delivering justice exactly when you need it most. I'm Nadine Everett, and before I tell you how I systematically dismantled the career of the man who tried to destroy mine, I want you to know something. This isn't just another story of workplace revenge. This is about reclaiming power when someone tries to strip you of your dignity. If you've ever been humiliated, underestimated, or pushed aside, stay with me until the end. Each moment of this story might give you the courage to stand up when it matters most. That night at Castellano's restaurant was supposed to be a celebration of our department's record-breaking quarter. Instead, it became the stage for my public humiliation. Terrence Fowler, my direct supervisor and the company's golden boy, had always been cruel behind closed doors. But this was different. This was calculated destruction. I'd finalized my divorce from Preston just 3 weeks earlier after discovering his 2-year affair with my closest friend. The wounds were still raw, and Terrence knew it. When the handsome stranger kissed my cheek and slid into the chair beside me, I was as shocked as everyone else. Up close, I recognized him immediately. Elliot Walsh, CEO of Horizon Innovations, the client our company had been desperately trying to land for months. "Nadine," he said warmly, "I spotted you from across the restaurant and had to come say hello. Our conversation at the industry conference last month was the highlight of my evening." Terrence's face transformed from smug satisfaction to panic in seconds. The wine he'd been drinking dribbled down his chin as he struggled to compose himself. "Mr. Walsh," he stammered, half rising from his seat. "What an unexpected pleasure." Elliot barely acknowledged him, keeping his attention on me. I've been reviewing your proposal. It's exactly what we've been looking for. Perhaps we could discuss the details over lunch next week. The table remained silent, everyone processing what was happening. I felt a slow smile spread across my face, the first genuine one in weeks. I'd be delighted, I replied. That night changed everything. As I drove home to my empty apartment, I didn't cry as I had every night since Preston left. Instead, I planned. I started working at Palmer Technologies 5 years ago, climbing from junior analyst to senior project manager through pure determination. My marriage to Preston had been crumbling for years before I discovered the affair, but I'd poured my heartbreak into my work, exceeding every target. 3 months ago, the director position opened up, a role I was perfectly qualified for. I'd prepared an extensive presentation outlining my vision for the department, supported by 5 years of exceptional performance reviews. You lack executive presence, Terrence had told me afterward, not bothering to hide his smirk. He promoted Bryson instead, a man who'd been with the company half as long and whose reports I regularly corrected. What no one knew, not even my closest work friends like Valencia and Dexter, was that Terrence had cornered me at last year's holiday party, drunk and insistent. When I firmly rejected his advances, something dark flashed in his eyes. Be careful, Nadine, he'd whispered. I decide who succeeds here. After being passed over for promotion, I began documenting everything. Each inappropriate comment, every instance where women's ideas were dismissed only to be praised when repeated by men, the subtle ways he undermined female employees' confidence. I created a password-protected document, adding to it daily. I also noticed patterns in our financial reports, discrepancies that didn't add up, client overcharges, expense reports with suspicious entries, equipment that disappeared. I said nothing but took meticulous notes. The morning after the dinner incident, I arrived at work to find a message from Valencia asking to meet for coffee. We'd always been friendly, but never close outside of work hours. What happened last night was unacceptable, she said once we were seated in the corner of a cafe 2 blocks from the office. And it wasn't the first time. She slid her phone across the table. On it was a recording from a meeting where Terrence had taken credit for her marketing strategy, the same strategy he'd initially called too ambitious, when she proposed it. I'm not the only one, she said quietly. By the end of the day, 2 more colleagues had approached me. Dexter had documentation showing how Terrence had stolen his client acquisition method and presented it as his own. Lumi from accounting had noticed the same financial irregularities I had, plus more. We should meet, I suggested, not to complain but to strategize. That Saturday, the 4 of us gathered at my apartment. I made coffee while they settled around my kitchen table, nervous energy filling the room. Before we start, I said, I need you all to understand something. What we're discussing isn't just about personal grievances. This is about systematic misconduct that's harming the company, our clients, and our careers. I shared my documentation, carefully organized, factual, unemotional. They added theirs. By evening, we had a comprehensive picture of a man who'd built his career on taking credit for others' work, manipulating numbers, and systematically holding back women and minorities from advancement. The quarterly board meeting is in 2 weeks, Dexter noted. Terrence will present his department update. And he'll certainly take credit for Horizon Innovations, Valencia added. He's already telling everyone he's the one who secured the connection. I felt a plan forming, not based on emotion or personal attacks, but on cold, hard facts. Here's what we'll do, I said. The next 2 weeks were tense. We continued gathering evidence while performing our jobs flawlessly. I reached out to Elliot Walsh with a simple question about his availability for a video call during our upcoming board meeting to discuss implementation details. When the day arrived, Terrence strutted into the boardroom in his expensive suit, confidence radiating as he prepared to present his department's achievements. The board members settled in, and our CEO, Augustine Perry, opened the meeting. When Terrence's turn came, he launched into his presentation, highlighting the department's successes, most of which were directly attributable to team members he'd sidelined. The crown jewel of his presentation was the announcement of securing Horizon Innovations as a client, a deal potentially worth millions. Through persistent relationship building and strategic negotiation, he boasted, I've managed to bring Horizon into our portfolio after competitors have tried and failed for years. I felt rather than saw Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi tense beside me. This was the moment. Before we move on, I said, raising my hand, I believe there's been a misunderstanding about the Horizon Innovations relationship. The room fell silent. Augustin looked surprised at the interruption, but nodded for me to continue. With your permission, I said, I've invited someone who can clarify. I opened my laptop, and within moments, Elliot Walsh's face appeared on the main screen. Good morning, everyone, he said pleasantly. Nadine suggested I might help clear up some confusion. What followed was Elliot explaining how he'd met me at an industry conference, been impressed by my insights, and subsequently reviewed the proposal I'd sent him. He had never met or spoken with Terrence. Terrence's face drained of color. There must be some mistake, he interrupted. I've been overseeing all client acquisitions. That's interesting, Elliot replied, considering Nadine is the only representative from your company I've had any contact with. Augustine frowned, looking between Terrence and me. Is there something I'm missing here? Actually, I said calmly, there's quite a bit. I distributed copies of a report to each board member. This isn't a complaint about personal treatment. This is a comprehensive analysis of how our department has been mismanaged for the past 2 years. The report detailed everything: the financial discrepancies, the talent suppression, the credit stealing, all meticulously documented with dates, figures, and supporting evidence. What is this? Terrence demanded, his voice rising. Some kind of witch hunt because you're bitter about not getting promoted? I didn't respond to the bait. Instead, I nodded to Valencia, who stood. I can verify the section regarding misattribution of work, she said professionally, playing the recording from her phone. Dexter followed with his evidence. Then Lumi presented the financial analysis. Throughout it all, I remained calm, focusing on facts, not emotions. This wasn't about my humiliation at the dinner or his rejection of my promotion. This was about business misconduct that had cost the company money, opportunities, and talent. The board members exchanged glances. Augustin's expression had grown increasingly grave. These are serious allegations, he finally said. Terrence, do you have a response? Terrence's confident facade cracked. This is clearly a coordinated attack. He sputtered. They're all friends. They're conspiring against me because I hold them to high standards. The numbers speak for themselves, I replied evenly. And there are dozens more examples not included in that report. We can provide those too if needed. Augustin asked everyone except the board members to step outside. As the door closed behind us, I could hear Terrence's voice rising, then the firm tone of our CEO cutting him off. In the hallway, Valencia squeezed my hand. Whatever happens, she whispered. You stood up. We all did. For 30 minutes, we waited in tense silence. Then Augustine's assistant appeared, asking me to return to the boardroom alone. The air felt heavy as I walked in. Terrence was gone. Augustine and the board members sat with grim expressions. Sit down, Nadine, Augustine said, gesturing to a chair. And that's when everything changed. They had questions, dozens of them. How long had I been aware of these issues? Why hadn't I come forward sooner? How had I managed to build a relationship with Horizon while performing my regular duties? I answered truthfully. I explained how I'd tried to address issues through proper channels but been dismissed. How I'd feared retaliation if I spoke up alone. How I'd built professional relationships at industry events on my own time because I believed in the company's potential. What happened at the company dinner the other night? One board member asked. Mr. Walsh mentioned something about interrupting an uncomfortable situation. I hesitated. This was where personal and professional collided. Terrence publicly mocked my recent divorce, I said simply. Mr. Walsh happened to be dining nearby and came over to say hello. It was coincidental timing. The board members exchanged looks. We've placed Terrence on administrative leave pending a full investigation, Augustine finally said. Based on what we've seen today, That investigation will likely confirm your report's findings. He paused, studying me carefully. We find ourselves in need of an interim department head while we conduct a proper search for a permanent replacement. Would you be willing to step into that role and be considered as a candidate for the permanent position? The world seemed to still. 5 years of work, months of documentation, weeks of strategic planning, all leading to this moment. I would, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. As I left the boardroom, I saw Terrence being escorted to his office by security to collect his personal items. Our eyes met briefly. In that moment, I realized the most devastating part for him wasn't losing his job. It was realizing I'd beaten him not through emotional outbursts or personal attacks, but by being exactly what he claimed I wasn't: executive material. That evening, I returned to my apartment and poured myself a glass of wine. My phone buzzed with a text from Elliot Walsh. Dinner next week to discuss implementation details? As colleagues, of course. I smiled. The future suddenly held possibilities I hadn't dared imagine weeks ago. But as I sat in the quiet of my living room, I realized this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. Because what Terrence and the board didn't know was that the financial discrepancies I'd discovered went much deeper than one man's misconduct. They pointed to something more systematic, something that reached all the way to the executive floor. And I now had the perfect position to investigate further. The next morning, I walked into the office as interim department head. The shift in energy was palpable. Curious glances, whispered conversations that stopped when I approached, and a few genuine smiles from those who'd witnessed Terrence's behavior firsthand. Valencia met me at my new office door. "Congratulations," she said, her expression a mix of admiration and concern. "Are you ready for this?" "More than ready," I replied, setting my bag on the desk that had been Terrence's just yesterday. "But we have work to do beyond just celebrating." Over the next few days, I scheduled individual meetings with every team member, not to interrogate or intimidate, but to listen. What did they need to succeed? What obstacles had they faced? What ideas had been dismissed that deserved reconsideration? The pattern that emerged confirmed my suspicions. Terrence hadn't acted alone in his mistreatment and manipulation. He'd been protected, even encouraged, by higher-ups who benefited from his methods. Exactly 1 week into my new role, Augustine called me to his office. His assistant, Ivy, gave me a tight smile as she ushered me in. "Nadine," Augustine greeted, not rising from behind his imposing desk. "Please sit. How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you," I replied, noticing the tension around his eyes. "The team has been remarkably resilient." Good, good. He shuffled some papers, not quite meeting my gaze. "I wanted to touch base about the quarterly numbers. The board is concerned about the discrepancies you highlighted." "I'm addressing those now," I said. "In fact, I've been reviewing past financial reports in detail." Something flickered across Augustine's face, so brief I almost missed it. Fear. "That's not necessary," he said quickly. "The board has authorized an external audit. Your focus should be moving forward, not dwelling on past issues." "Of course," I agreed smoothly, though understanding the patterns helps prevent future problems. Augustine leaned forward. "Between us, Nadine, Terrence made enemies, powerful ones. Your promotion is a fresh start for everyone. I'd hate to see you inherit his problems." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. I maintained my composure while my mind raced. This wasn't just about protecting the company from embarrassment. Augustine was worried about what else I might find. "I appreciate your concern," I said, standing. "Rest assured, my priority is the department's success." As I turned to leave, Augustine added, "The external auditors start Monday. They'll need full access to all financial records." "Absolutely," I replied. "Transparency is essential." The moment I left his office, I texted Lumi. "Need to talk." Not at the office. That night, Lumi, Valencia, Dexter, and I met at a small diner 20 minutes from the company. Over greasy fries and coffee, I shared my conversation with Augustine. "He's scared," Lumi said, her accounting mind already connecting dots. "And he should be. Those discrepancies I found, They're consistent with someone siphoning funds through shell vendors. The same pattern appears in the client billing, Dexter added. Small overcharges spread across dozens of accounts. Not enough for any single client to notice, but adding up to hundreds of thousands annually. Valencia, who handled marketing communications, looked troubled. Last year, Augustine personally approved a six-figure budget for a marketing campaign that barely materialized. When I asked questions, Terrence told me to drop it. I pulled out my laptop. Auditors arrive Monday. Whatever evidence exists might disappear before then. We worked through the night, pulling reports, cross-referencing transactions, and building a secure digital repository of everything we found. By morning, we had compelling evidence that Augustine and at least two other executives had been systematically embezzling from the company for years, using Terrence as their willing enforcer. This goes beyond workplace harassment or credit stealing, Dexter said grimly. This is criminal. So what do we do? Valencia asked. Go to the board again? I thought about Augustine's subtle threat and shook my head. Not yet. We need to understand who on the board might be involved. For now, we document everything and create backups. The weekend passed in a blur of activity. We carefully copied files, captured screenshots, and archived emails. Monday morning arrived with a sense of foreboding as the external auditors set up in the conference room. At precisely 10 a.m., Augustine called an unexpected all-hands meeting. The entire company gathered in the main presentation area as he took the stage, his executive team flanking him like a royal court. As many of you know, we've had some leadership changes recently, he began, his voice carrying the practiced warmth of a seasoned executive. Following an internal review, we've identified some concerning business practices within the project management department. My heart pounded as I realized what was happening. This wasn't damage control. It was a preemptive strike. While we initially believed these issues were limited to one individual, our preliminary investigation suggests a broader pattern of misleading reports and data manipulation. Augustine continued, the external auditors will help us determine the full extent of the problem. His gaze found me in the crowd. In the interest of a thorough investigation, we're placing all senior members of the project management team on administrative leave, effective immediately. The room erupted in whispers. Valencia grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. Dexter's face hardened as he understood. We were being neutralized. This is a precautionary measure, Augustine assured everyone, not an accusation of wrongdoing. But it was exactly that. By placing us on leave, he was cutting off our access to the very evidence we needed to prove his guilt. Even worse, he was positioning us as the perpetrators, not the whistleblowers. As the meeting dispersed, Augustine approached me directly, security personnel hovering nearby. I'm sorry it came to this, Nadine, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. You should have focused on moving forward, not digging up the past. I met his gaze steadily. Is that what Terrence did wrong? Digging too deep? A flash of surprise crossed his face before he composed himself. It will need your laptop and company phone. You'll be escorted to collect your personal belongings. As security walked me to my office, I noticed similar scenes playing out with Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi. Our eyes met across the office floor, a silent communication of resolve. They couldn't know we'd already secured the evidence they were trying to bury. That evening, we gathered at my apartment again, shell-shocked but determined. They're setting us up, Valencia said, pacing the length of my living room. By the time the audit finishes, they'll have scrubbed everything and planted evidence against us. Not everything, I replied, pulling out a flash drive from my bag. Remember how I insisted on taking bathroom breaks during our escorted exit? I had this hidden in my personal makeup bag. The flash drive contained copies of the most damning evidence. Documents showing Augustine's direct approval of fraudulent vendors, emails discussing how to conceal overcharges, and the trail of money flowing to offshore accounts. This isn't enough, Dexter argued. They'll claim we fabricated it all. You're right, I agreed, which is why we need to be smarter than they are. I outlined my plan, a plan that had been forming since I first discovered the extent of the corruption. We wouldn't go to the board, who might include Augustine's accomplices. We wouldn't go to the media, who might sensationalize without understanding the complexity. Instead, we would go directly to the company's largest shareholders and clients simultaneously, people with real power and a vested interest in the truth. It's risky, Lumi warned. If we're wrong about any of this. We're not wrong, I said firmly. And we have one advantage they don't expect. What's that? Valencia asked. I smiled for the first time that day. Elliot Walsh. The following morning, I called Elliot, not as a potential romantic interest, but as the CEO of a company about to enter into a major contract with mine. Nadine, he answered warmly. I was just thinking about you. Elliot, I need your help, I said, skipping pleasantries. And I need to know I can trust you. His tone shifted immediately. What's happened? I explained the situation, the fraud we'd uncovered, our administrative leave, and Augustin's likely plan to frame us. I was careful to stick to facts, not emotions. Send me everything you have, Elliot said without hesitation. My legal team will review it today. There's more, I added. Horizon isn't the only client being overcharged. I have evidence affecting at least 11 major accounts. Elliot was silent for a moment. This could be industry-wide news, Nadine. I know. That's why I need your help reaching out to the other affected clients. Coming from you, CEO to CEO, they'll listen. By afternoon, Elliot had confirmed what we already knew. The evidence was compelling. By evening, he'd arranged a conference call with 4 other CEOs whose companies had been systematically overcharged. Meanwhile, Dexter activated his network of industry connections to quietly approach 3 major shareholders with our findings. Not as a scandal, but as a serious governance issue requiring immediate attention. For 3 days, we operated in careful silence, building our coalition. Valencia prepared a comprehensive presentation that laid out the evidence chronologically, while Lumi created financial summaries that even non-accountants could understand. On the 4th day, Augustine called me. Nadine, he said, his voice artificially pleasant. I hoped we might discuss a mutual resolution to our current situation. What did you have in mind? I asked neutrally. The preliminary audit has raised some questions about financial approvals that appear to have your digital signature. His tone hardened slightly. However, the company is willing to accept your resignation without further investigation. We'd provide a generous severance package, of course. There it was, the trap closing. They'd already begun fabricating evidence against me. That's a generous offer, I replied, keeping my voice even. When would you need my decision? By close of business tomorrow, he said. For your own benefit, I suggest accepting. The alternatives would be unpleasant for everyone. After hanging up, I immediately called our group. It's happening, I told them. They're making their move. So we make ours, Dexter replied. The next morning, as Augustin waited for my resignation, a different kind of meeting was taking place. In the private dining room of the Grand Hotel downtown, Elliot Walsh hosted breakfast for 5 CEOs, 3 major shareholders, and 2 board members who'd been carefully vetted as uninvolved in the fraud. I arrived last, carrying the final piece of evidence, Terrence's personal notebook, which his assistant had secretly provided after witnessing his abusive behavior for years. In it, Terrence had documented conversations with Augustine about which employees to silence, which clients to overcharge, and how to conceal their activities. For 2 hours, I presented our case, not as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, but as a finance professional exposing systematic fraud. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, Eleanor Harding, the company's largest individual shareholder, spoke. I've seen enough. This requires immediate action. By noon, the board members had called an emergency session. By 3, Augustine received a call demanding his presence at the corporate headquarters immediately. By 5, security was escorting him and 2 other executives from the building. I wasn't there to see it. Instead, I was sitting with Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi in my apartment, waiting. At 5:30, my phone rang. Eleanor Harding herself. Ms. Everett, she said formally. The board has removed Augustine Perry, effective immediately. We've also terminated Peter Griffith and Wendy Talbot for their participation in the fraud. I closed my eyes briefly, relief washing over me. Thank you for taking this seriously. We're in your debt, she replied. The board has asked me to inform you that all four of you are not only reinstated but will receive formal apologies. Additionally, we'd like you to continue as interim department head while we complete a thorough executive search. She paused. And Miss Everett, the board hopes you'll apply for the permanent position. After hanging up, I looked at my friends, the allies who had risked everything to stand with me. It's over, I said simply. Valencia shook her head. It's not over. It's just beginning. She was right. Over the next month, the company underwent a complete transformation. The external audit expanded to review 5 years of records. 3 more executives were removed. Clients who had been overcharged received full restitution. And me? I applied for the permanent department head position. After 3 rounds of interviews with the restructured executive team, I was appointed not just department head, but vice president of operations, a new role with oversight of multiple departments. My first official act was promoting Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi to senior positions where their talents would be recognized and rewarded. My second was implementing a company-wide anonymous reporting system for ethical concerns. 6 months after that fateful dinner where Terrence had publicly humiliated me, I hosted a department celebration at the same restaurant. As everyone enjoyed their meals, I stood to make a toast. To resilience, I said, raising my glass, and to the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Across the room, I caught Elliot's eye. He smiled warmly, no longer just a business ally, but something more. We'd been dating quietly for a month, taking things slowly, both aware of how our professional relationship had evolved into personal connection. Later that evening, as Elliot drove me home, he asked the question that had been hovering between us for months. You could have stopped after exposing Terrence, he said. Why risk everything to go after Augustine too? I considered my answer carefully, because true change doesn't come from removing one bad actor. It comes from transforming the system that enabled them. He nodded thoughtfully. You know, when I walked into that restaurant and saw how that man was treating you, I had no idea I was stepping into such a significant moment. Neither did I admitted, but I've learned that sometimes the worst moments in our lives become the catalyst for the best changes. As we pulled up to my apartment building, I thought about how far I'd come. From the woman crying alone after her divorce to someone who had transformed not just her own life, but an entire company culture. Want to know the irony? I asked Elliot as he walked me to my door. Terrence was right about one thing that night. I couldn't keep my husband. But not because I was too ugly, because I was too strong to stay where I wasn't valued. Elliot took my hand. Their loss, my gain. As I unlocked my door, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I glanced down and couldn't help but smile. Augustine Perry had just been indicted on 37 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and financial misconduct. Justice comes in many forms, I murmured. Speaking of justice, Elliot said, did I tell you Terrence applied for a position at one of my competitors' companies? Their CEO called me for a reference. What did you say? I asked. Elliot's eyes twinkled. The truth, that he lacks executive presence. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or humiliated, remember this. Your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's rising so far above them that they become irrelevant to your story. This journey taught me that standing up for yourself can inspire others to do the same. If my story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Like and subscribe to make sure you never miss another story of transformation and triumph. Because together, we can create workplaces where talent is recognized, integrity is rewarded, and no one has to suffer in silence.